Welcome to Shareholder Primacy from Free Float Media, a podcast about activist investing, securities law, and all the ways the financial and legal worlds intersect and collide in real life. Ann Lipton and I have returned once again for this week. Ann Lipton is a law professor, at the University of Colorado who teaches and researches securities and business law, right? You are a law professor, right? I think
I am a law professor. That is true.
I checked. Not finance, not humanities, or legal's kind of humanities adjacent. Law professor, University of Colorado, who teaches and researches securities and business law. She holds up the legal end of our podcast.
And that's Mike Levin, an activist investor who lives and works in Chicago. He covers the financial side of our podcast.
Yes, I do. All right, Ann, how you doing today? You doing well?
I'm doing fine.
Great, cool. Just busy with work is what I would suspect. Trying to get the end of the term
as the end of term
under control.
Drafting exam, all that kind of fun stuff.
Oh, lovely. All right, cool. All right, let's talk about a couple of relatively recent, kind of activist situations. I don't really know the noun. Are they situations? Are they engagements? Are they
I would call them either. You're the expert.
Okay. Let's call them situations today. Activist situations this week. One is at BJ's Wholesale Club, symbol BJ, having to do with a interesting precatory proposal, and the other at Snapchat, SNAP, which is famous, at least among some activists, for some governance problems we'll talk about in a little while, where a particularly good activist has tried to agitate for some change. So maybe we'll cover both those today. How's that?
Sounds good.
All right. And what else do we have to tell our listeners?
Oh, mailbag. Yes, you can always, if you like, send us email, ask questions, ask us to comment on stuff, whatever you like. You can email us at shareholderprimacy@freefloat.llc. Yes,
let's keep those cards and letters coming, as they used to say. Anyway, let's plunge into the first of our two situations, which is an interesting precatory proposal at BJ's Wholesale Warehouse. As I said, symbol BJ. They got in a situation, we'll call it a situation, I like that today, a situation where a shareholder essentially either persuaded or compelled BJ to include a particular precatory proposal on the upcoming 2026 AGM agenda and proxy statement. So let's talk a little bit about the proposal, and then we can talk about kind of what it means. I don't know how you kind of looked into this too. I think we both kind of
we both saw this. I mean, and it's really funny because we're talking this time, I think, about Trillium, but it's worth mentioning that New York State Common Retirement Fund is actually engaged in a lawsuit right now to force the same company, BJ's, to include a report on the risks of deforestation on their proxy. And that, as far as I know, that lawsuit is still ongoing. But Trillium had an alternative way, rather than a lawsuit, of getting their proposal.
They didn't threaten litigation. They threatened something else,
which was much more interesting. Yes.
Yes. So Trillium Asset. Who's Trillium Asset Management? Trillium Asset Management is an ESG oriented fund. So they have a bunch of assets. They're not merely a consultant or advocate, but they have some real money, which will become important in a moment. And they submit a small number of proposals each year, but they vote, quite vocally on a lot of proposals. And they have a stewardship report that they issue and so forth. Again, we're not talking about, a huge asset manager, but, among the ESG community, they're one of the larger in terms of AUM, assets under management, activists or ESG type activists. And they submitted at BJ's roughly around January 6th of this year, a precatory proposal. It had to do with writing a report on greenhouse gases, or doing something more than what BJ's already does for greenhouse gases. and disclosure about what they do and what they emit and what they do to mitigate and so forth. The kind of usual E-oriented precatory proposal. So, if it passed, BJs could, decide not to do it.
To ignore it. It's a precatory proposal. They don't have to follow it.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
So on January 6th, they filed it in a timely way. So that they got it in, under the wire or whatever. There was a little bit of correspondence. I don't know if you looked into the SEC stuff, but there was, okay. So I read some of the correspondence. So the first thing that BJ's did is they said you got a procedural deficiency. They didn't actually prove their share ownership in the first letter. They only referred to what their share ownership was rather than submitting documentary evidence. And usually in these cases, you just got to either submit, for individuals like Jim McRitchie and John Chevette, and they just submit a redacted brokerage statement that says, here's the shares we own. In this case, Trillium submitted a letter from their custodian, which I think was Northern Trust, that said, here's our shares. So anyway, so they cured a procedural deficiency about share ownership, and it surprises me somewhat still.
That's the kind of thing that seems you would kind of have down as far as
exactly. I would have Trillium,
or
could have sent this in originally, but anyway.
Actually, I don't know. For all I know, it's common for really well-known asset managers to not submit that, and companies just let it go because they know maybe that's a possibility. Like BJ's is just using whatever it can. I don't know.
Just trying to make him jump through all the hoops. Anyway, then what became more topical was BJ submitted the by now standard no objection request to the SEC, saying, and they had a long letter from their law firm. I can't remember who it was. Might have been Howry. Wrote him a letter saying, here's the basis, which they were using was ordinary business.
It's always, it's ordinary. Yeah. And it's funny because the SEC invited companies to object on the ground that Delaware does not permit precatory proposals. But so far, no one's biting. Instead, they're just sticking to its ordinary business.
Right. So BJ's said, here's we request not no action, but no objection, as it's called these days, based on ordinary business exclusion. And Trillium replied, as they're allowed to do.
Yeah, this is not ordinary business.
Very standard, right? Okay. And then sometime, I think in February, probably within 5-6 weeks, the SEC wrote their 3-line letter saying, we will not object.
Yeah.
The company had, stated a reasonable basis for thinking that this was ordinary business. So we're just going to let them proceed, and we will not pursue any kind of enforcement against the company.
Right. So, and again, just to reiterate, at a similar point, New York State Common Retirement Fund just sued BJ's because there was nothing you could get out of the SEC. Right. But that's not what. Yeah, but that's not.
And half a dozen other companies, other investors also sued companies.
Yeah, we talked about. Yeah, we talked about this. It's just amusing because it's the same company, but Trillium went in a different direction.
Yes, right. Trillium then evidently decided to threaten to solicit proxies itself.
Yeah. Now, it was going to run its own proposal-only proxy contest.
And this is what I have been waiting for. Okay? Just as a reminder to people, we saw a version of this 2 years ago at good old Warrior Met Cole. We've talked about him on the pod several times. And just to refresh people's memory, the AFL-CIO, the mine workers, essentially did the same thing. Yeah. They didn't even go through the no action process. At Warrior Met Cole, they basically just said, we're going to solicit proxies for a labor relations proposal and 4 other good governance proposals.
Right. Yeah, because first of all, at Warrior Met, it's very possible that their labor proposal really would have been ordinary business. And second of all, you can if you're going through 14A8, you can only do one proposal at a time. Right. So the union and Warrior Met, the mine workers, they said, I'm not even going to if I avoid 14A8, I can avoid all the restrictions. I don't have to worry about ordinary business. I don't have to worry about one proposal per
or
meeting.
Length, 500
or
words,
length.
right?
So they just skipped 14A8 entirely. Trillium decided to do this because they had been rejected.
Yeah, exactly, as a consequence of the 14A8, right? And again, the Warrior Met one took place in the context, pre the new no objection.
Yeah, but even
process.
then, they couldn't have done it other than through
Warrior Met. I mean, the AFL, the mine workers basically said, "Screw it, we're just going to go right ahead and we're going to bring it right to Warrior Met coal." Trillium took this extra couple steps. So, and what we know about what Trillium did basically came from a news release. So it's not like we have SEC filings we can work with. So Trillium, as they reported in a news release, they threatened. They didn't use, I think. They didn't cite, Rule 14A8, but they basically said we're going to do our own solicitation, or they reported this, and then they said we are going to, or we threatened. This is interesting. They put all these threats out in a news release, which rather than just saying the outcome, which we'll get to in a sec, they said, and we were also going to potentially include other good corporate governance shareholder proposals, in addition to the greenhouse gas proposal that was really of interest to them. So they were kind of copying, at least in terms of the structure of the Precatory proposal. They were fashioning it after what the mine workers did at Warrior Met Coal. Yeah. So there was going to be, at Warrior Met, there were like 4 different good governance proposals and the labor relations proposal, all 5 of which ended up on the proxy statement and got votes. And we've talked about that.
We talked. I mean, just as a reminder, so the idea here is that Warrior Met was going to run, the United Mine Workers was going to run a full-scale proxy contest, but its ballot was what they were contesting were shareholder proposals. They weren't running director candidates.
Right. That's the zero director thing.
Yeah. And Mike, this was your insight. The reason this was such a threat to Warrior Met wasn't just because they might get the votes, but because they would lose control of insight into the proxies. Because if people returned the mine worker proxy, I'm repeating your analysis. If people returned the mine worker proxies, then Warrior Met not only wouldn't have insight into them, they wouldn't necessarily even know if they had a quorum. So they were kind of forced to agree voluntarily to include these proposals on its own ballot to kill the alternative circulation. And that's basically what Trillium's doing.
Right. Well, yes. So again, there was no agreement at Warrior Met Coal. This actually went to a vote.
Well, went to a vote because they put it on their own own proxy.
Right, exactly.
That's what they
BJ's learned from this, clearly. Yeah. Okay, BJ's, if they didn't, it sure looks like they studied what happened here at Warrior Met Coal and AFL, the mine workers. Because the nature of the agreement, this was settled, so to speak, and the settlement was BJ agreed to just include the proposal.
Right. That's ultimately what.
Well, that's what Trillium. That's
what Trillium wanted all along.
That's what Trillium wanted. Right. So I have some comments about what Trillium did. So first, there's another fact to introduce to this, which is that shareholders voted on this last year. This exact proposal from Trillium at BJ's, and it got like 30% support.
Which is a lot.
It's just decent for these
Precatory
things.
proposals, that's a decent showing. That's put pressure on the board showing.
So it's conceivable that it could have done as well or better, or maybe a little worse. I don't know. In this environment, it's hard to tell how this stuff's gonna go. Again, I didn't study the BJ's investor base, or I didn't look at that. I just looked at it.
I always assume that large asset managers are sort of quieted by the current regulatory environment.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was the first thing. Second, another, I don't know if it's a fact, is that, Trillium is not some, rando kind of individual or little tiny pension fund. Trillium has means. Okay, Trillium is a big, I don't know how wealthy, I don't look at their expenses, but, they could spend some money on a proxy contest if they really wanted to. So their threat to solicit proxies for this proposal was legit.
Yeah, we said.
Okay.
I remember you said the United Mine Workers, when they actually ran it before Warrior Met agreed to include their proposals on their proxy. When
Yes.
United Mine Workers was circulating, I think you said the whole thing was going to cost them around $15,000.
Exactly, right. Or that's what they end up spending. And Trillium
Yeah.
could spend a multiple of that. I mean, they may not want to.
Right.
You know,
Well, they might want
they-
to make the point that they're willing to.
Right.
They wouldn't do it every single time, but they just have to make the
But
point
this was
once.
a total credible.
Yeah.
We could run a proxy contest. We could disrupt your AGM voting. We could get all 5 on the ballot. Blah, all that
Yeah.
stuff. Okay.
Right.
So and let's recall what they agreed to do. BJ's in this settlement. It's not like they agreed to implement the proposal.
They agreed to let it be
They
voted.
agreed just to put it out, just to vote. Okay, and so this is where I'm saying I think Trillium let BJ's off easy. Okay, because they could have either negotiated implementation of the proposal. Others, at least one time this year, in the whole face of the no objection structure that's come up, at least one company responded to the threat of, in this case, litigation by just saying, "Okay, we'll implement the proposal." I think that was the American Airlines one. So rather than just saying, "Okay, let's let shareholders vote on it," AT&T, sorry. Rather than just letting shareholders, let's just implement it, BJ's. Come on. It got 30% last year. It's probably going to get more this year, or possibly going to get more. Just do it. Just do your disclosure. Write whatever report we're looking for, okay? Or Trillium could have really forced the issue and said, okay, we're going to put this and all these governance proposals on the ballot, and we're going to really stick it to you. All right. You see, this is where, like I said, Trillium settled for, either settled for too little or set their sights too easy when they just wanted this on the ballot. Okay. And this is, again, I've said this before. This is my what bugs me about precatory proposals. It's not the proposal part. It's the precatory part.
They can't be. Well, they can't be binding. I mean, they literally legally can't be binding. But
the vote can't be binding. But they could have gotten them to settle to implement.
Maybe. I don't know
what they want.
Maybe. I think. Well, I mean, I'm going to make 2 things about this. So once again, this is something that you had. Your analysis back when this first happened at Warrior Met with United Mine Workers.
Yes,
so the only reason a proposal-only contest can even be run as a practical matter is because of universal proxy.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it means that for the first time, if shareholders run a contest where the only issue is vote on my proposal, they can still list all the directors and all the other normal stuff that's on the meeting on their ballot, which means shareholders can say, I will vote for the proposal and vote for the directors and return my proxy card.
Right.
But
exactly.
if we and just to make clear, if we didn't have universal proxy, then when Trillium ran its proposal-only contest, it wouldn't be able to list on its ballot directors, which means if you're returning a proxy card and you have to either return the company card or Trillium's card, you would have to not vote on directors at all.
Right, which none of the big funds, all the funds that were going to support this, that normally would say, yes, this is a great greenhouse gas thing and we love it, they wouldn't be able to do it. So you're exactly right. Yes.
So but I also want to make 2 of well. So first I want to point that out, but I want to.
Okay, that was 1. How many more do you want to make, Ann? Come on.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Also, what Trillium said, by the way, is that BJ's has a massive, thick set of advance notice bylaws, which is worth mentioning. Now they're there for director contests. I mean, they're there for your normal usual activist engagement. That's what they're there for. But Trillium still had to comply with them because they are worded to have to do with any shareholder business. So all whatever, insane set of hoops you have to jump through to propose business at a sharavholder meeting under today's advance notice bylaws. Trillium was complying with all of it.
They were prepared to
list
do it.
What have I, what is my interest and have I hedged and whatever other things you have to have for an advance. So they were going to comply with that. But here's the thing. After Warrior Met United Mine Workers, and also Fox News Starboard also had that thing, right? Where Starboard was running a proposal-only contest at Fox News to get rid of its dual-class structure for whatever reason.
That's right.
After those, I think it was the Business Roundtable, it's definitely a business group, has asked the SEC to clarify or amend the universal proxy rules to say that it's only good for director contests, that you can't use it for proposal-only contests. So I think this has become a really important tool for shareholders that have the means, especially because running a proposal-only proxy contest can be relatively cheap, as we said. I mean, relatively.
Right.
Like I, as a human being, wouldn't spend $15,000 on it, but if I were an institution
but
with
a
a lot of
fund,
money
sure, exactly.
Yeah. So, it's become or growing to potentially be a new source of shareholder pressure in a world where 14A8 is losing its power and various other aspects of shareholder rights are being sort of dialed back. This is something that shareholders can do, at least some shareholders can do. But already there are like squawks from the business community asking the SEC to amend or clarify or whatever to its rules to take this power away. So we'll see whether the SEC actually does that.
We'll see how they follow up. But for now, Trillium did the proper follow-up in a sense, threatening BJ with this contest, and BJ agreed. And my only concern was, like I said, Trillium let him off easy here.
Yeah, so we'll see how it gets voted.
Absolutely. All right, cool. Let's we got one other we want to talk about today. We'll talk about Snap in a minute. All right. Okay. Here at Shareholder Primacy.
Shareholder Primacy is brought to you by FreeFlowAnalytics.com, the only free database of corporate directors, their influence, and their performance. If you own a stock or retirement plan, go to FreeFlowAnalytics.com and look up which of your elected directors are performing well and which aren't. Use your vote in the alternative democracy and get your data at FreeFlowAnalytics.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Shareholder Primacy. I'm Ann Lipton with Mike Levin, and we are talking about Snap.
Snap. Who is Snap?
Snap as in the company that has Snapchat, which is, I use a lot of social media. I do not use Snap. So
did you use Snapchat at some point?
No. I was too old
for it. My kids did
even
for a while. My kids used Snapchat for a while. I think I still have Snapchat on my phone, and I have an account, but I don't think I ever used the Snap.
I have never had an account. I'm old school text-based kinds of things.
Okay. Well, you use some social media. You must have a Facebook
I use a lot of social media, but it's all text-based stuff. It's
all right, cool.
I'm on Blue Sky all the time.
Blue Sky, but a Facebook account? Instagram?
No, I deleted that when Mark Zuckerberg made apologies for Holocaust denials.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so Snapchat. Snapchat, believe it or not, I saw some data in looking into this. Snapchat is like among the top 4 or 5 social media apps. Still. Right. I mean, Facebook's the monster. Instagram is close, and Meta owns both.
Right. Yeah.
Twitter X is up there, but then Snapchat, I think, is either 4 or 5 in terms of usage statistics.
Okay.
But that's not. Yeah, me neither. Well, so this was
which may explain the situation in which
it's a really interesting company, kind of corporate governance wise. So here's a little bit of the background. So there's 2 founders, Evan Spiegel, who everybody knows, Robert Murphy, who's a little less well known. They IPO'd the company in 2017 after taking VC money for quite a while. At the time it was a really hot IPO. At the time they IPO'd, they implemented a share structure where there's actually 3 classes of shares. There's A's, B's, and C's. We don't have to focus on the letters. It's worth saying that Spiegel and Murphy control 99% of the votes. It is a completely controlled public company. Yeah. Okay. There's a tiny bit of voting shares out there in public hands, but not even.
But most of the public shareholders, they don't have any votes at all. They have these like no vote shares.
Right. So there's actually 3 public shareholders worth mentioning: that Fidelity, Vanguard, and also Tencent. Remember Tencent?
Yeah.
In China. Together, they own about like 28% of the non-voting shares. That's not 28% of the economic interest. Right. Because Spiegel and Murphy still control a bunch of that, but there's 28% of the non-voting shares.
But all the shares that are publicly traded, if I were to go and buy Snap shares, I would be buying non-voting shares.
Oh, absolutely right. Yeah, yes, right. There's been the offering back then was on the A shares, was the non-voting shares, and it was kind of unique at the time and remains kind of unique. So
Yeah,
as
like
a
even
result,
the dual class companies tend not to have like completely non-voting shares, but there are
Yes.
some, yeah.
right. So as a result, because of the degree of control, some of the usual conventions and niceties of public companies are completely absent here. They still do reporting. You can go get their 10K.
They're a reporting company, but
Right.
they don't have to file proxy statements because they're not asking for shareholder
There's
votes.
no
votes.
shareholder meeting. They don't even have an AGM.
Right. I mean, there are weird requirements about this. There are certain kinds of disclosures that reporting companies need to make that they usually make in their proxy statement. But if they don't have proxies, as here, because they don't have votes, because the shareholders don't have any votes, they have to move those into the 10K. So there are certain disclosures that would normally go in the proxy that are in the 10K.
Right. So if you want to know anything about the corporate governance, which, again, I was never a Snap investor for various reasons. I tend not to even be interested in these kind of hot IPOs for reasons like this. So I had to go do some research and trying to figure out some of the share classes and the voting and so forth. I had to read the 10K. I couldn't find any kind of proxy statement because there's no shareholder meeting.
There's no shareholder meeting. And I think you said there are nobody, even if you get a stake, you don't file a Form 13D because
there's no G, right? Yeah,
because those are only filed by people with voting shares, and nobody can get voting shares.
Right. Okay. So here's what's happened, kind of echoing what we talked about the kind of app it is and how you and I are like a little not familiar with it. Shares are down 75% since the IPO in 2017. Okay. And, the market since 2017 is up a lot more than that.
Yeah.
In particular, Meta and Alphabet,
the tech
Google,
companies are. So Snap
everybody's
is behind.
up a huge. So Snap is like way behind. And there's a lot of Snap investors like that, Fidelity, Vanguard, and Tencent, which are just kind of aggravated because they can't do it. They have no authority over it.
They have no governance rights, right?
Right. So normally this would just kind of bump along. And all these non-voting shareholders, would you try to sell or something or whatever.
And that's pretty much all you got.
They're kind of stuck. Well, one shareholder decided to take matters in their own hands and try to change this. Okay, so there's actually a couple worth mentioning. The biggie is Irenic. It's a newer activist fund. They own about 2.5% of the economic, basically 2.5% of the non-voting shares, or something.
Well,
like that.
they said they don't actually own all of them. Like in some cases,
right.
they have
some
derivatives, but they claimed at 2.5% exposure
of economic exposure to the company. And there's two founders. Andy Katz is the main one. He's former Elliott. Then there's another guy from Indaba. Two like really good pedigreed activists who are good. Irenic's done some other really good projects. And they wrote a whole big presentation. You go find it. I think it's called Save Snap or something is a website. They got a whole bunch of ideas to try to get them from $4 to $20. It's currently trading at about $4 range per share. And they think it can get as high as 26.
That's a lot.
Which is huge. I mean, that would catch up completely with a lot of the share price performance from some of its peers. And they have a detailed thesis, and they have this website I talked about. They wrote a letter, and they have a news release and a presentation. They got all sorts of stuff. Okay. And part of their point is that Evan Spiegel and Robert Murphy would clearly benefit.
Right.
They could burst out of the rough. I think Spiegel's stake's worth about $1 billion. He could become a mega billionaire.
The theory is we can't vote, but we really have good ideas, and it will benefit you financially, so you should listen.
Right. Now, so the question is, what's Irenic trying to do here? They have no hope of electing directors, putting bylaw amendments up.
Right.
Nor any of the conventional pressure points that activists might try to push on, it just are not available. Okay.
Right.
So the question becomes, are they trying to embarrass or try to shame or something some of the company leadership? And I have a comment about that. Okay. The first is what is the is this enough?
Right.
Is this bad enough leadership to kind of pay attention. I'm not sure. Snapchat's done, pretty poorly, but, I'm not sure how much, Spiegel himself or Spiegel and Murphy actually care about this. Okay. There are people who do care, which would be the independent directors. So there's a board of, I think, 8 who are, various different industry types, some holdovers from the IPO and so forth. So you'd think that they would have some degree of professional pride. And this is a point that Matt Levine made last week.
Right.
Because he also focused on this a little bit. But I want to go a little deeper than he was able to do. Is there some sort of level of shame that these independent directors are susceptible
We're just going to feel for how badly the company is performing, and
exactly. And the problem is if any of these directors, read over the Irenic materials, and there's another fund called Randy and Capital that has started to echo it, and they've started to write a bunch of letters.
They've sort of jumped
too.
in. Okay.
And I know Randy, and they're also very skilled at this, and so they're together with Irenic, they're trying to put a lot of pressure here.
Okay.
If they were to start to put pressure on the independent directors, and these independent directors were able to say, this is embarrassing. Mm-hmm. I think those independent directors have only one choice, is to quit.
They could quit. They might. Yeah, they could see if they could pressure Spiegel, I guess, and pressure.
Yeah, but what's Spiegel going to do? Spiegel's going to hold a meeting and find new directors who are going.
Well, right.
Look,
No, that's the thing. Right. It depends on whether they have Spiegel's ear, I guess.
Right. Or the question is what's the threshold of shame for Spiegel and Murphy?
Right.
How susceptible are they to this kind of public pressure, to this kind of image and so forth? Now, part of the problem is Spiegel's a young guy. Spiegel's like 35. Spiegel is, on the one hand, a lot of money. So, he probably, he might not care about this, okay? Or he might be waiting for a bid or something. I don't know. On the other hand, he's got a lot of years ahead of him. And if he cares about, his next public company, maybe he would be susceptible. I don't know.
I am of the view that people who become that wealthy do not do it by saying, "Oh, I've got enough. I can retire now." Like, that's rare. They do seem to want. They do seem to want to maximize value. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
that's the open question. Is what are Spiegel and Murphy's pressure points, and how much do they care about what they look like and how bad this company looks?
Yeah, and I can say, I'd be curious if you have a view of how often we see activism in controlled companies, because I can think of a couple of other examples. They're unusual. So first of all, as we just said in the previous segment, Starboard, for whatever reason, was trying to solicit a vote on whether Fox should get rid of its dual class structure, which obviously it couldn't possibly win, but it
right. But Fox reacted, didn't react too negatively. There was some discussions and so forth, and that pushed some of the dialogue along on that subject. Nothing has changed yet, but evidently Starboard was not unhappy with
how that came out,
with how it started to proceed. And that's about as close as we're going to come to this company. But go ahead.
But the other one is Peloton, because this was a couple of years ago, where Blackwell's agitated at Peloton, which was doing very poorly post-COVID, I guess. And they actually got their founder CEO to step down. Basically by saying, "Look, you're really bad at this. Look at how much the stock price has dropped. Don't you think you want to retire and step away?" Right. And they actually succeeded.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And Blackwell's is also, they're uniquely aggressive about this kind of thing. A Rennick's case here was pointed but civil. Blackwell's was willing to kind of go to the mat in some ways. That were really trying to, I suppose there's things if a Rennick really wanted to force the issue, they could really find stuff to try to embarrass. And their presentation is really all focused on the business and advertising, all the kind of the business levers rather than very little of it's focused on. They have one section about how to improve governance and so forth, and let's give the non-voting shares a little.
Yeah,
more
they have a
vote or
proposal. I don't know
something.
how much they mean it, but they're asking for, among other things, I think they're asking for artificial intelligence because that's what everyone asks for, and they're asking for votes to be given to the public shareholders, even as Spiegel and Murphy maintain their control.
Right. So allow them to have control, but get a
allow
structure
shareholders
that's
to have some kind of voice.
right,
Yeah.
a little closer to like what Meta has.
Yeah.
Which is still, the Zuckerberg controlling the votes.
But at least shareholders get to talk back. It has to distribute a proxy. Shareholders can put a proposal on the ballot, whatever.
Right. Well, so you asked an interesting question, which is how often does this happen at controlled companies? And there's not that often, because of this very reason, is that most of the time, most activists, this is where I really respect but kind of wonder about ironic, is that, trying to do this, trying to go after them and, spend some money to, and I probably haven't spent a ton yet. There's no SEC filings. There's not a lot of lawyers involved. So right now it's just a lot of their own internal research. But most activists, once they see a structure with this degree of control, are reluctant to pursue it for this kind of reason.
That's what I would have thought. So is Ironic? They're relatively new, is that right?
Yes, right.
So I wonder.
If
this is
2-3 years old. Yeah.
So I wonder if this is like an engine number one thing. Like, I want to make a big splash with like some kind of high profile-ish thing, and succeed or not, now my name's out there.
Don't underestimate that. Again, that's not the main reason that an activist, especially one of the newer ones, or got founded in the past 5 or 6 years. It's not the main reason to do this, but sure, you get some attention. You can sort of show the depth of your analysis. And who knows, there's a chance that Spiegel, is finally saying, okay, maybe it's time.
Yeah, because the market reacted positively to this.
Oh, exactly, right. So somebody thinks, I think it was up 20% in the week, or like 19% over the week when I checked on Friday. So there was some sort of positive reaction to this. So we'll sort of see. It could work out. I'm intending. I put a watch on this. I'm going to again. Snap was nothing that I ever followed, but now I'm kind of curious
to see,
about what's going to happen and whether these founders are, how much they really care about what people think rather than how much control they actually have.
Right.
It's a perfect case, if in the extreme, given their degree of control. It's a perfect case to kind of illustrate the principle here, which is, again, that's I think what Matt Levine was getting at when he wrote it up. So anyway, we'll kind of follow this one and sort of see what happens. All right.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Let's leave it at that, and we can maybe move on to something else for the week. All right. And we'll come back next week too and talk about some new stuff. All right.
All right.
Cool.
Sounds good.
This is Shareholder Primacy, hosted by Ann Lipton and me, Mike Levin. I'm an independent activist investor and advisor to investors about their activist situations. Ann is professor of law and Lawrence W. Demuth Chair of Business Law at the University of Colorado Law School. You can find me, Mike, at theactivistinvestor.com, and you can find Ann Lipton at law.colorado.edu. Our podcast is produced and distributed by Free Float Media. Thanks for listening. Talk again soon.